Let's talk about the comma. It's probably the most powerful and maybe the most misunderstood little mark in all of English punctuation. It can be super confusing, I get it. But you know what? By the end of this, you're going to have a really simple way to think about it, so you can use commas with total confidence. So let's dive right in.
Okay, take a look at this sentence. To George, Harrison had been a great friend. What does that even mean? Is someone telling George that Harrison was a friend, or is George the friend? It's a mess. It's totally unclear. And this is exactly where the mighty comma comes in to save the day. And boom, just like that, with one tiny little mark, the meaning is perfectly clear. Now we know, without a doubt, that someone is telling George that Harrison was a great friend. This just shows you how absolutely crucial getting your commas right is for making sure people understand what you're trying to say.
So why are commas so tricky for so many of us? Well, I think it's because we're often taught a million little rules that are impossible to remember. We're going to fix that today. We're going to boil it all down to just 3 main jobs that a comma does. That's it, just 3. But before we even get to the jobs, let's just think about what a comma feels like. It's basically a little traffic signal for your reader. It tells them, hey, pause here for a second, or this idea is separate from the next one. Its whole purpose in life is just to make things clear and guide your reader through your writing. And here it is. This is the simple framework we're going to use. Seriously, pretty much every comma rule you've ever heard fits into one of these 3 jobs. A comma is there to separate things, to connect ideas, or to set off extra information. Once you get this, everything else clicks into place. Let's start with the first one.
All right, job number 1. This one actually covers 2 things that are really closely related: separating and connecting. We'll start with how commas separate things, because that's probably the one you know best, and then we'll see how that idea helps us connect complete thoughts the right way. This is the classic, right? The one we all learned in school. When you have a list of 3 or more things, you use commas to act as little dividers. It keeps everything neat and tidy and stops it from becoming just one big jumble of words. Simple, clean, and easy to read. Now, this is a cool one. Commas also separate adjectives. So if you have 2 words that are both describing the same noun, like here, old and battered are both describing the cap, you pop a comma between them. Here's a quick trick. Try to swap them. Does battered old cap still make sense? Yup. If you can flip them, you need a comma. Okay, this is a big one. This is probably the most common comma mistake out there, the comma splice. You can't just stick 2 complete sentences together with only a comma. It's just not strong enough. To do it right, you need the comma and a little connecting word, a conjunction, like and, but, or so. That and is like the glue that makes the connection work. And hey, if you find you've made a comma splice, don't sweat it. You have 3 super easy ways to fix it. You can add a word like and or but, like we just saw. You could swap the comma for a semicolon, or you could just break them up into 2 separate sentences with a period. All 3 options are perfectly correct. Okay, on to the second main job. Commas don't just separate and connect, they also set off information. I want you to think of them like little parentheses or brackets that you can put around extra details you want to tuck into your sentence.
Now, this job revolves around something called a non-essential clause. I know, that sounds really technical and boring, but it just means bonus info. It's the kind of detail that adds a little extra flavor, but if you took it out, the sentence would still make perfect sense on its own. Here's a perfect example. See that phrase, located near the airport? It's giving us some extra info about the hotel. And notice how it's nestled right there between 2 commas? Those commas are signals to the reader, saying, hey, this part is just some extra detail for you. And here's the proof. This is the ultimate test. If we just lift that phrase out, what are we left with? The hotel was very convenient for our stay. The sentence still stands on its own. It's perfectly fine. If you can do that, you know you've used those commas correctly. This whole setting off job also works in a few other places. You use a comma to set off an introductory phrase, like after getting ready, or when you're talking directly to someone, like Lisa, and for little interjections like, well. In each case, the comma just creates that little pause and separation that makes the sentence clear. Okay, so we know the 3 main jobs. Now, let's do a quick rapid-fire round of some common traps to avoid, because honestly, knowing where not to put a comma is just as important. This is a classic trap. You should never, ever separate the main subject of your sentence from its verb with just 1 comma. My dog is the subject. Likes is the verb. They are best friends. They have to stick together. You wouldn't say, my dog, pause, likes to play fetch, so don't write it that way.
Remember that comma splice we talked about? Well, this is the flip side. When you're connecting two full sentences with a word like but, and, or so, you've got to have that comma in there. It's the signal that you're finishing one complete thought before starting the next one.
It is so easy to fall into the trap of adding commas wherever you might pause if you are speaking out loud, but you have to resist. For instance, you don't need a comma between a verb like dropped off and what it's acting on, a package. When in doubt, it's often better to leave it out than to just sprinkle commas everywhere. And here's one final kind of tricky one. Here's the rule of thumb. If a phrase like because it was late comes at the beginning of a sentence, you use a comma after it. But if it comes at the end of the sentence like it does here, you usually don't need a comma at all. The sentence just flows better without it.
So let's bring it all home. It really does come back to those three simple jobs, right? A comma is there to separate, to connect, or to set off. If you're ever staring at a sentence and you're not sure if you need a comma, just ask yourself, which of these three jobs is it trying to do?
And that's our deep dive into conquering the comma. See? The goal isn't to memorize 100 different rules. It's just to understand why the comma is there in the first place. So think about your own writing for a second. Which one of these rules, maybe it's fixing comma splices or knowing when to set off extra info, which one do you think is going to make the biggest difference for you? Thanks so much for joining me.